My name is Andrew Bisson. I'm the Managing Director at Zybus Group, and we're a research and advisory services company for the tech sector. And very happy to be here to host this session today, along with some experts we have from CA that represent various business units within the organization. The main goal for today's session is to provide some perspective on how culture, tooling, processes all play a role in DevOps maturity from mobile to mainframe. So one of the things we're going to be looking at is to gain the insight from our panelists in terms of how they see and how you can benefit from modernizing legacy data, using legacy data within that context. So moving along, before we jump into the panel, what I'd like to do is provide some background just in terms of the level of importance for mainframe and some of the challenges that exist. So when we look at mainframe, it really is critical in terms of its role in the digital transformation process. And some interesting stats are out there in terms of the level of importance here. So mainframe continues to run 70% of today's business transactions. And when we look at other stats that are out there, 55% of enterprise applications, as well as over 80% of mobile transactions, touch the mainframe in some regard. Some other interesting stats that CA has provided is within their customer base, we're seeing that over 78% of CA mainframe customers are expecting MIPS growth. We're also seeing over 1.3 million KICS transactions per second. And when we also look at the fact that there's over 220 billion lines of code, which continues to grow annually, roughly by 5 or 6 billion new lines of code each year, it's quite impressive. And I think it basically signals that the mainframe cannot be overlooked as part of the digital transformation process. With that, though, there are some challenges. When we start factoring in DevOps and Agile, there's a variety of studies that say that there's room for improvement. And we see here that 49% of organizations still lack standardized Agile development. Further, 66% lack an integrated DevOps practice. So with that, what does it mean? It basically means that adding DevOps practices to an Agile environment matters. So why does it matter? It matters because studies are also showing that it improves new business growth, in some cases by upwards of 63%. And it also helps increase operational efficiency by around 41%. So these are some interesting stats to keep in mind as we go through this panel session today. So with challenges, there's always areas to optimize. And when we look at traditional approaches to development and we factor in some of the new tooling that exists today, in addition to some of the new processes that organizations are taking on, there's really a lot of opportunities in terms of where we can optimize. So some of that deals with, for example, eliminating the silos within organizations, allowing more effective communication across different departments, and letting better collaboration exist between QA, between a development organization, operations, the product management team, the executive suite. So it's really about bringing those folks together and having better collaboration there. So these are a couple of high-level things I think we're going to touch on over the course of the panel today, and better understand what's going on in mainframe environments, where are some of the challenges that customers are seeing, and how CA helping customers in that regard. So I'll get our panel members to come up on stage. I'll do a brief introduction here. Today we have Aline Giroux, who is Senior Vice President of Product Management within CA's Automation Business Unit. Aline is an accomplished software engineer and product management executive with over 27 years of experience of delivering innovation and driving results. She is responsible for product strategy, go-to-market strategy, and engineering for CA's automation solutions. So welcome.
Hi.
We also have Scott Morrison, who is Senior Vice President and Distinguished Engineer within CA's API Management Business Unit. Scott joined CA as part of its acquisition of Layer 7 Technologies in 2013, where he was Chief Technology Officer. As an architect and developer of highly scalable enterprise systems for over 25 years, Scott has deep experience in industry sectors as diverse as healthcare, travel and transportation, as well as financial services. Next, we have Steve Filoni, who is Vice President of Product Management within CA's Continuous Delivery Business Unit, where he's responsible for the company's service virtualization, application test, release automation, and test data management solutions. Previously, Steve held product management roles with a focus on enterprise software at companies from HP to startups. And last but not least, we have Jean-Louis Vignaud, who many of you have seen over the course of today and yesterday, who is Vice President of Product Management within CA's Mainframe business unit. Jean-Louis has been in product management roles for more than 15 years, starting as product manager in the change and configuration management space, then moving into application lifecycle management, DevOps, and Mainframe. Prior to this, Jean-Louis had experience in development, pre-sales, and post-sales. So I thank our panelists for joining us today, and we'll start up with our first question, which is basically, talk to us a bit about, what's important to mainframe customers today, and how are your teams working with mainframe customers? So I think I'll get Jean-Louis to lead off with an overarching view of mainframe.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Andrew, sorry. What we're seeing today is we're seeing mainframe is legacy. You have been sharing a set of numbers talking about 80% of the transaction data being managed by mainframe. If we look at it as well, from an industry perspective, 92 of the top 100 banks are running on mainframe. 23 of the top 25 airlines are running on mainframe. So really, as you said, mainframe is completely relevant to the digital transformation. And last year we had, Beth Johnson, SVP at SunTrust Bank, here sharing with us experience. And what she said, and make a perfect point, is she wants to see a mainframe as an enabler of innovation, not a bottleneck, but an enabler of innovation.
Great, thank you. Steve, maybe you can provide some perspective from the continuous delivery perspective.
Yes, when we look at our customers, most of the time when we're talking about continuous delivery, we're talking about distributed applications. And what's happening is, as was mentioned, all these companies that we work, all the financials, the insurance, credit cards, automobile industries, they all have the mainframe in the back end. And so as they're trying to become agile and become more continuous testing, continuous delivery, they're running into an area where the mainframe, right? The mainframe is a massive part of that business, and they're trying to figure out what they need to do in order to bring the mainframe into that entire process because they know it has to happen.
Great. Aline, how about you from the automation side?
So from an automation point of view, the mainframe is extremely important. So much so that we recently announced at CA World here in our press release that we've developed a CA Atomic release automation for Z Connector. What we're seeing in basically, Steve, what you said is you have the major financial institutions, retail, state, local government, federal government, all still running on the mainframe. And it is very key for our products to span the enterprise and include mainframe in that as well. There's a major retailer in the US that uses our CA Atomic release automation product to move their applications from along the continuous delivery map and from test to production. So much so that they have, I think it's 100,000 nodes that they're deploying out to, and mainframe is part of that infrastructure. So, and then being able to decrease their time to production by 75% by automating that across. And most customers have, it's mobile to mainframe in their application, so very important.
Good. And Scott, maybe you can close off on that question, tie it together as it relates to API management.
Sure. Well, nobody's getting rid of their mainframe. Nobody. None of our customers are even looking at trying to sunset things. They instead want to do exactly what Jean-Louis mentioned, which is turn it into a new area of innovation in that. And the way to do that is to explore new channels of delivery and to recognize that there's this just tremendous value, in effect, locked up And what we have to do is open it up so people who really have no connection to the mainframe whatsoever can begin to really get access to that. I come from the API management group, and that's exactly what we do. APIs are a very simple and easy way to actually access data from whatever, regardless of whether it's a mainframe or a database, or even a exotic cloud-based microservice system. It's a standardized way, a standardized approach to plugging different systems in. And that's exactly what we're seeing, is exploration of new channels by using APIs as the basis. A good example, actually, is a large Latin American bank, which is a CA API management customer that's really looking at using the technology as a way of opening the mainframe up both to internal channels where they want to create new innovations and new applications and access of data, mainly through things like desktops and that, but also to external customers, where the question is much more about mobile devices. And the beauty of being, using something like CA's API management infrastructure for this is all of that channel can be the same, effectively. It can be using the same infrastructure to come in and access that core mission-critical data that exists on the mainframe today.
Great, thank you. So it's obviously evident that the mainframe still has a very significant role in the marketplace, and as it relates to the digital transformation process within organizations, and as they're changing their processes and their approaches to development. Maybe share with us some of the challenges you're seeing within client organizations, and describe some of the ways in which CA is helping those clients solve some of those challenges. So we'll start off with Aline on the automation side.
So, in the first slide that you had brought up, there is still a lot of COBOL applications on the mainframe running that business logic. There's still a lot of data on the mainframe as well. So some of the challenges that we're seeing from a mainframe perspective is making sure that we're running a tool chain across the enterprise, again, from that mobile to mainframe application. So you are developing new technology, you're fixing bugs in existing applications, the chances are that is hitting an application that sits on the mainframe, the business logic that sits on the mainframe of the data. So extremely important to make sure that we have those tools that the application developer can use across the DevOps tool chain. And again, from an automation point of view, release automation, deployment is a key aspect in that.
Okay, great. Scott, maybe you can share some perspective on API management?
Sure. For our customers, security and SLA is like a day one concern. And it makes sense. When you think about it, you're opening up core mission critical data to, let's say, an iPhone app developer, who doesn't even know how to spell MIPS. And so you want control. You want governance, you want careful execution of that data. And that's exactly what we're doing with API management in front of the mainframes. A good example there is a large big box retailer, here in the US, which actually uses us to integrate both with the mainframe but also CA's SiteMinder technology. And what's interesting about that is it's really a case of mapping of identities from both external identities to internal identities, and finally to concepts of identity and entitlements into the mainframe itself. And we become kind of the broker for all of that communication and all of that mapping. So it always comes down in the end to making sure that you're confident that the right people are getting access to the right information at the right time.
Great, thank you. Steve, how about continuous delivery?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges that our customers have is when it comes to testing. A lot of them don't want to test on the mainframe because of MIPS. We all know no one wants to spend more MIPS than they have to. And so when you're performance testing and you're functional testing, they want to virtualize the mainframe out. And so we have the ways of using virtualization to virtualize the mainframe out. But even those that want to test into the mainframe, there are certain systems on the mainframe that they don't want to use, and so they want virtualization inside the mainframe. We help with that as well. We have large credit card companies, as well as large automotive companies, large retail companies, all doing this type of thing with virtualization. But it's not just virtualization of the services and virtualizing out the mainframe. There's also a challenge of how do you get access to the data that's on the mainframe? Because I want to use that data to do my testing, because the mainframe is the system of record. and how do I get that data out? And so we have test data management that will help get that data out, mask that data to make sure that that data is clean so that you can do testing with that, as well as virtualizing out those pieces. So those are two areas. Plus, when it comes to functionally testing on the mainframe, we actually have tools that reside on the mainframe, such as app test, to help run tests inside the mainframe itself. So we have so many different ways of helping bring the mainframe into the new way of doing testing and helping that mobile to mainframe, like you were talking about, instead of just ignoring the mainframe and just trying to cut it out, how to bring it in and have it as part of it. You also mentioned it's not just about the testing. In order to do the testing, sometimes you have to get the deployment done. And so using Atomic with the deployment, with the new connector that you used to have, now we can auto-deploy the applications or the services onto the mainframe so we can do that testing. And so we have the entire process. So you don't just have to wait. We can do a continuous way of doing testing with the mainframe. And if the mainframe isn't available, we can virtualize that out so you can constantly keep testing without having to wait to get access to that mainframe.
Great. Jean-Louis, maybe you can close.
So in complement to what we have been talking here, one of the key questions we have to answer, one of the key challenges, how do you make your workforce, your developers, your DevOps architects, have the same level of performance when they work on mainframe than they do on other platforms. And that's one of the big challenges here. We have been talking about Agile, we have been talking about DevOps automation, but one of the key issues is how do you entice the new developers in line of business to be working on the mainframe? How do they make them see mainframe for what it is in terms of performance, security, reliability, scalability, all the benefits of mainframe? So it's all about the developer experience here. And last year we introduced CA development environment for Z, which is an advanced Eclipse-based IDE, which enabled developers within a single IDE to have all the capabilities they need to do advanced COBOL development, advanced PL1 development. And this year, we're introducing something completely different. So what we are looking into is we're targeting those developers that are using their own tools. They could be using Visual Studio Code, IntelliJ, or whatever tools, Gradle, Gulp, whatever development tools. And what we are doing is we are providing them with the ability to continue to use the tool that they are using to develop on the distributed platform to be used to develop on the mainframe as well. And that has been demonstrated on the show floor, and it's called Project Brightside.
Great, thank you. So we've talked about the importance of mainframe. You've described some of the challenges within environments and how CA is playing a role. Now let's take a look at how we can extend DevOps to mainframe and how customers can benefit from multimodal development, test, and delivery. So Scott, I'll let you lead this one off.
Well, DevOps is an interesting thing, and it really is transformative to the teams that adopt it. And I very much see it as a continuation of Agile. Like the genius of Agile was that really what it did is rather than break up a development group into these little tribes like I'm development and I'm QA and I'm documentation. Instead, what it did is it aligned everybody's interest towards a very, very common goal and a very, very short-term goal. So instead of doing a bunch of development for a month and then throwing it over the wall to QA, and they would test it and throw it back over the wall and say it was crap and boom, 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 and get this isolation between the groups. Agile said there's one team. There's one team, and there's only like 7 people on it, and we are all aligned towards a goal which is going to be 2 weeks in the future, and we're going to deliver something of value. And that aligned everybody's interests. So rather than having these 2 different groups sort of staring each other down and complaining about each other, it aligned everybody towards that one common goal and forced communication by doing stand-ups and things like that. DevOps, I think, goes over the next chasm, because the problem is if we build software and just throw it over the wall to operations, we're going to get the same problem. We're going to get that sort of tribal separation between the 2 groups. And DevOps instead says, if you build something, you take it right out into operations. And that's profoundly important, because that creates like a sense of ownership and a sense of responsibility. And let me tell you, nothing increases your quality better than knowing you're going to get that phone call at 3 a.m. on the thing that you built. So aligning those interests is a really, really important thing in technology and that. And I think that's what we've seen in the distributed world. That's how we get like just tremendous use of our resources. And I think brought into the classic mainframe world, it can show very, very similar kinds of very, very effective uses of resources, but within the context of the governance of the mainframe. And one of the things I really respect about the mainframe world is that it has a very strong governance model for who does what. And so I think you can find the best of both worlds, but it does take some effort, and you've got to be willing to break some eggs along the way.
Great. Steve, how about your thoughts?
So the mainframe for DevOps, I look at it as, one, why? Why does the mainframe have to come into DevOps? And there's a few reasons. One is what we said earlier. The mainframe is such a huge part of almost every application. Whether it's mobile, whether it's web, the mainframe's still part of it. But it's not just that. Trying to entice and get new developers to start working on the mainframe, it becomes very important because those developers want skill sets that they can take and move with them. And if they think that they're not learning on the new way of doing development, on doing Agile and doing DevOps, that's going to be a challenge because then they don't want to work on the mainframe. So even if you don't think you need to go to DevOps for a particular application or a particular way of doing things, if you need to get new developers to work on the mainframe, you don't really have a choice. You have to go that route. But when you have the tools to really help get the entire DevOps practice brought into the mainframe, it becomes so much easier. When you're using things like continuous delivery director that we have that helps manage the entire process from requirements all the way over into the deployment and the production onto the mainframe, and having those tool sets such as service virtualization and test data management that really helps enable the testing and the virtualizing out of the mainframe, and having those tools that really helps bring the mainframe into a full DevOps community. People don't think it's necessarily possible when we talk, because a lot of times everyone's just focused on distributed. They don't think it's possible to bring the mainframe into DevOps. It is. We have customers that are doing it today. I'm not saying it's the easiest thing. I'm not saying it's a turnkey, but it needs to happen, and we have very large institutions that are able to do it.
Great, great. Aline, how about you on the automation side?
So you're absolutely right. The tools that you're
I'm always
using.
right. Just
The need for speed and agility is key, and that need for speed goes across the enterprise. It's not specific to one organization or one platform. It goes across all the development teams, across the multiple platforms that the application developers. And what I've been seeing and talking with customers is that's really all starting to come together, right? They want to use the same tool chain regardless of whether it's on an enterprise platform or it's on a mainframe platform, right? So needing to bring that together and using that, using the benefits of the of what they've been using on the distributed platform and that multimodal practice that they've been using for new innovation, but bringing that to some of the legacy programs that they continue to work on and continue to be key to the business agility in the business transformation is something that the developers need, the business needs today.
Great, thank you. Jean-Louis.
Sorry, one sec. One thing I wanted to add, so we were talking about the TDM and service virtualization, but APIM is a huge key. If you can take a lot of those calls and actually make the APIs out of them, now you can start testing those APIs in a much easier fashion. You can automate the creation of those API tests. You can link that into the APIs and have that proper governance that you need into the mainframe. So being able to link all these different tools together really enable the DevOps. Yeah. Just wanted to make that point.
And CA is uniquely positioned.
Yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Because
we have the full end-to-end, all those different tool chains that and they are integrated together.
Yes.
It's not that they're not integrated together and stuff happening in the future. It's now. We have those integration pieces.
Great.
We'll let you
So-
speak.
Sorry.
Jean-Louis.
I apologize.
So I'm going to sum up what we have been talking about here. So what are the benefits for customers? What we are looking for, customers are looking for is business agility, it's innovation velocity. And what we are looking is to provide an experience enabling them to develop and run the new type of workloads such as blockchain, machine learning workloads, hyperscale cloud workloads on the mainframe, because mainframe is perfect fit for this type of workloads. So that's what we are aiming for here. And to just to summarize and conclude on, we have been highlighting the story of HSBC in our keynote on the mainframe, the success of HSBC going through a digital transformation. One of the key objectives of HSBC is to completely transform the way they are doing business. They want to digitize everything. They want to eliminate all the papers. And therefore, they have been embarking on this DevOps transformation. And what they achieved today is that they have completely automated their CI/CD pipeline, and they are able to do about 2,000 deployments per month. They are using CA Endeavor for this purpose. They have about 2,700 developers working. They are doing about 750,000 changes per month, on the artifacts managed under Endeavor, and I think it's about 6 million artifacts. So that really, is highlighting an example of what you can achieve, on mainframe.
Great, thank you. That's the questions we had for the panel today. I'm wondering if anybody from the audience might have some questions to ask them. Take advantage of the time we have left.
I like to talk, so I don't know if I necessarily have a question, and I know because we have a small group here, I actually maybe want to make a comment, and it's to say thank you for this discussion today, because I found it very helpful. I am the manager for our mainframe infrastructure at the bank, that I work for, and I'm new to that role. I've been in the mainframe operations area, but and I'm finding, I think it's falling on me to become the champion of the mainframe where I work, because we're talking APIs, we're talking Agile, we're talking DevOps, but they're not talking about it so much in the mainframe space. They're talking about it in the open system space. So I just want to say I appreciate this discussion and other discussions that I've seen here at CA World, because it's great information for me to take back and, like I said, champion at the place I work.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? No? We'll close off with one last slide. We've seen this slide quite a few times over the course of the last few days, talking about the modern software factory. And really what we see here is for the outcomes that organizations are looking for. And that's creating an agile business, building better apps faster, getting to market quicker, making security a competitive advantage, and of course, maximizing application performance. So one final closing thought with that in regard to mainframe is I think it's really, it's not about ripping and replacing existing systems and putting it to the side. It's about leveraging and extending those systems through new practices, through DevOps, through some of the new tooling that exists and some of which CA provides. So I think that's important to evaluate as organizations move through the digital transformation process. So I thank our panelists.
Thank you.
And I thank the audience for staying around. And if you have any questions, we'll be around for a few minutes after the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.